Captain Lee Tae-jin gripped the control panel as another explosion rocked the UES Harmony. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge while alarms screamed through the ship. Through the main screen, he could see the enemy vessels closing in, like hungry wolves. "Captain, we've lost engines 3 and 4, shouted Lieutenant Park Ji-woo from his station. "Hull breach on deck 7. We're losing atmosphere fast." Tae-jin watched the Vorthak raiders tear through his ship's defenses. These alien pirates had been hunting human vessels for months, but this attack was different. They weren't just trying to steal cargo, they wanted to destroy everything. "Sir, emergency pods are ready," called Sergeant Kim Da-hee. "We need to evacuate now." But Tae-jin knew the truth. The escape pods would never make it past the Vorthak fighters. His crew of 37 souls would die in space, picked off one by one. The planet below, Verdania, would be next. The peaceful aliens living there had no weapons to defend themselves. Another blast shook the ship. This time, the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Tae-jin could hear the groaning of metal as the ship began to break apart. "Captain, the reactor is going critical." Park Ji-woo's voice cracked with fear. "We have maybe 3 minutes before complete core failure." Tae-jin closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his sister, back on Earth, about the promise he made to come home safely. He thought about the Verdanian children he had seen in the reports, their plant-like bodies swaying in the wind like flowers. "All hands abandon ship," he ordered into the comm system. "This is not a drill. Get to the escape pods now." His crew moved quickly, but Tae-jin stayed on the bridge. Someone needed to keep the ship stable long enough for everyone to escape. The Vorthak would focus their fire on the largest target. If he could keep the Harmony together for just a few more minutes, his people might make it. "Captain, you need to come with us." Da-hee grabbed his arm. "Negative, Sergeant. Get your people out of here, that's an order." Da-hee hesitated, then saluted. "It's been an honor, sir." Tae-jin watched his crew disappear down the corridor. Through the cameras, he could see the escape pods launching one by one. The Vorthak fighters chased some of them, but most made it to the planet's atmosphere. Good. At least they would have a chance. The reactor alarm grew louder. The core temperature was climbing past safe levels. In 2 minutes, maybe less, the Harmony would become a small sun. But the ship was breaking apart faster than he expected. A massive explosion tore through the hull near the bridge. The blast threw Tae-jin against the wall. When he got up, he saw space through a huge hole in the ship's side. Air rushed out in a violent stream, pulling everything loose toward the void. The artificial gravity failed. Tae-jin found himself floating, watching pieces of his ship spin away into the darkness. The planet Verdania hung below him like a green and blue jewel. It looked so peaceful from up here. Another explosion, bigger than the rest. The ship split in half right down the middle. Tae-jin felt himself being pulled toward the breach. There was nothing to grab onto. The emergency bulkheads had failed. He had 2 choices: stay with the wreckage and die when the reactor exploded, or jump into space and die from the cold vacuum. Either way, he was finished. But then he looked down at Verdania again. His crew was down there somewhere. If they survived the landing, they would need help. The Vorthak might follow them to the surface. Someone had to warn the peaceful aliens about what was coming. Tae-jin made his choice. He pushed off from a floating piece of debris and launched himself toward the planet. No suit, no protection, no parachute, just a man falling through space toward an alien world. The cold hit him first. Space was colder than anything he had ever felt. His breath came out in white clouds that froze instantly. His skin began to burn from the radiation, but he was still alive, still conscious. The ship exploded behind him. The flash was so bright it turned everything white for a moment. When his vision cleared, he was alone in the void, falling toward Verdania's atmosphere. This was impossible. No human could survive in space without a suit. The vacuum should have killed him in seconds, his blood should have boiled. His lungs should have burst, but somehow he was still breathing. As he fell closer to the planet, strange things began to happen. The space around him seemed to shimmer like heat waves. The terrible cold started to fade. He could feel warmth on his skin, as if something was wrapping him in an invisible blanket. The planet's atmosphere rushed up to meet him. He should have burned up like a meteor, but instead the air seemed to welcome him. Winds that should have torn him apart began to slow his fall. The atmosphere grew thicker around him, cushioning his body. Far below, in the forests of Verdania, something ancient stirred. The planet itself felt the falling human's courage and sacrifice. Here was a being who chose to die trying to save others rather than live safely while they suffered. This was what the world had been waiting for. Elder Una felt it first. She was tending to her grove when the sensation hit her like a wave. The trees around her began to sing, their leaves rustling without any wind. The very ground beneath her, feet vibrated with new life. "Mother, what's happening?" Her daughter Hana appeared beside her, her bark-like skin glowing with concern. Una looked up at the sky where a small figure was falling like a star. But this star was not burning. Instead, the air around it glowed with soft green light. "The world wakes," Una whispered. "After so long sleeping, our home remembers what it was meant to be." The falling human was still miles above them, but Una could feel his heart beating. She could sense his fear, but also his determination. He was not afraid to die. He was only afraid of failing others. "Prepare the healing grove," Una told her daughter. "We will have a visitor soon, one who has traveled very far to reach us." High above, Tae-jin felt the change in the wind. The planet was singing to him, though he could not understand the words. All he knew was that he was no longer falling alone. Something vast and gentle was guiding his descent, turning what should be certain death into something else entirely. Something impossible was about to happen on Verdania. And it all began with one human's choice to fall from the stars. Tae-jin woke to the sound of singing trees. At first he thought he was dreaming. The melody was soft and deep, like wind chimes made of wood and leaves. But as consciousness returned, he realized the sound was real. The massive trees around him were actually singing. He tried to sit up and gasped. His body should have been broken from the fall. Every bone should have been shattered. Instead, he felt stronger than ever before. His skin glowed with a faint green light, and when he looked at his hands, thin lines of the same light ran through his veins like rivers. "You are awake," a gentle voice said inside his head. "We have been waiting." Tae-jin looked around and saw her. Elder Una stood between two giant trees, her bark-like skin covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change. Her eyes were deep green, like pools of forest water. "Who are you?" Tae-jin asked, surprised that he could understand her words, even though she had not spoken aloud. "I am Una, keeper of this grove, and you are the one who fell from the sky like a seed looking for soil." A younger Verdanian appeared beside her. This one looked like a tree that had learned to walk with smooth bark skin and leaves for hair. "I am Hana, daughter of Una. You have been sleeping for 3 days." 3 days, Tae-jin struggled to remember. "My crew, are they safe?" "Most survived the landing," Una said. "They are in the valley settlement, being cared for by our people. But you, falling one, you are different. You did not land with machines and metal. You came to us with only courage and the will to sacrifice." Tae-jin stood up, amazed that his legs worked perfectly. "I don't understand. I should be dead. No one can survive a fall from orbit without protection. Come." Una gestured to the largest tree in the grove. "Verdania wishes to speak with you." She placed her hand on the tree's trunk, and Tae-jin felt compelled to do the same. The moment his palm touched the bark, the world exploded into sensation. He could feel everything. Every blade of grass, every drop of water in every stream, every breath taken by every creature on the planet. Verdania was alive, truly alive. And it had been waiting for him. Images flooded his mind. He saw the planet as it had been millions of years ago, young and vibrant, connected to other living worlds across the galaxy. He saw the coming of the Vorthak, destroyers of worlds, killers of planetary spirits. One by one, the living worlds had fallen silent, their consciousness snuffed out forever. Verdania had hidden itself, pretending to be just another dead rock with plants growing on it. But deep down, It had waited for someone who could understand sacrifice, someone who would choose others over themselves. You fell without fear for your own life, the planet's voice whispered in his mind. You thought only of protecting others. This is what we have waited for. But I'm just a soldier, Tae-jin protested. I'm not special. You are human, Verdania replied. Your species has something we need. The will to fight impossible odds. The strength to sacrifice everything for others. The stubborn refusal to give up. Footsteps approached through the grove. Tae-jin turned to see a human woman in a torn research uniform. She was small and thin, with short black hair and intelligent eyes behind cracked glasses. Dr. Kim So-ra, she introduced herself, xenobiologist from Research Station 7. I've been studying the Verdanians for 2 years. Dr. Kim, Tae-jin saluted. Captain Lee Tae-jin, UES Harmony. Your ship, she said sadly. We saw it explode. Everyone thought you were dead. I should be dead. Tae-jin touched the glowing lines on his skin. But something happened during the fall. Dr. Kim nodded. The planet saved you. It reached out through the atmosphere and caught you like a falling leaf. But Captain, there's something. You need to know about the Vorthak. She led him to a clearing where strange crystalline structures grew from the ground. These are memory crystals, she explained. The Verdanians store information in them. What I found here changes everything. She touched one of the crystals, and it began to glow. Images appeared in the air above it, showing scenes from across the galaxy. The Vorthak aren't just pirates, Dr. Kim said. They're planet killers. They can sense worlds with planetary consciousness, and they destroy them systematically. They see living worlds as threats to their expansion. The images showed world after world being stripped bare, their surfaces burned, their cores harvested. For energy, Tae-jin felt Verdania's pain as each world died. But why? He asked. Because living worlds can fight back, Dr. Kim replied. A truly awakened planet is nearly impossible to conquer. The Vorthak learned this long ago, so they developed weapons specifically designed to kill planetary consciousness. Elder Yuna stepped forward. Our world has been hiding for so long, pretending to sleep. But when you fell, when you showed such courage, Verdania remembered what it was meant to be. The other worlds. Tae-jin felt a strange certainty growing in his chest. They're not all dead, are they? No, Yuna said. Many still sleep, waiting for the right moment to awaken. But they need someone to show them it's safe to wake up. Hana pointed to the sky where stars were beginning to appear. The Vorthak felt our world stir when you fell. They will come back with bigger ships, stronger weapons. Then we'll be ready for them, Tae-jin said, surprising himself with his confidence. Dr. Kim stared at him. Captain, you're talking about fighting an empire that has conquered hundreds of worlds. I'm talking about giving sleeping worlds a reason to wake up, Tae-jin replied. He could feel Verdania's agreement flowing through him like warm sunlight. If one human falling from the sky could wake up this planet, imagine what we could do together. Through the trees, other Verdanians began to appear. They had felt the awakening too, and they came to see the human who had brought their world back to life. The first guardian, Yuna whispered, using a word that seemed to come from somewhere deep in Verdania's memory. Tae-jin didn't understand what that meant yet, but he could feel the truth of it. He was no longer just a soldier. He was something new, something that had never existed before. The bond between human and planet was growing stronger by the hour, and with it came power beyond imagination. 2 weeks had passed since Tae-jin's awakening, and the changes were impossible to ignore. The planet itself was different now. Rivers ran clearer, trees grew taller, and the very air seemed more alive. But the most dramatic change was in Tae-jin himself. He could feel everything Verdania felt. When Vorthak mining machines tore into the northern forests, pain shot through his chest like fire. When they poisoned the crystal lake with their chemical waste, he tasted metal and death in his mouth. The planet's suffering had become his own. Captain, you need to see this, Dr. Kim So-ra called from her makeshift laboratory in the village. She had been working day and night, studying the connection between Taijin and Verdania. Taijin entered the lab, which was really just a large hut filled with Verdanian memory crystals and salvaged human equipment. Dr. Kim looked exhausted, but excited. "I've been analyzing your blood samples," she said, pointing to a glowing display. "The changes are accelerating. Your DNA is adapting to match Verdania's biological frequencies." "What does that mean?" Taijin asked, though he suspected he already knew. "It means you're becoming something new, still human but also connected to every living thing on this planet. You're like a bridge between human consciousness and planetary awareness." A commotion outside interrupted them. Sergeant Kim Da-hee burst into the hut, her face grim. "Captain, we've got incoming. 3 escape pods, but they're not from our ship." They rushed outside to see the pods landing in the valley. When the hatches opened, a group of humans stumbled out, all wearing prison uniforms. Their leader was a tall man with sergeant stripes and tired eyes. "Commander Park Min-ho, UES Defiant," the man saluted weakly. "We've been prisoners of the Vorthak for 6 months. We escaped during a transport malfunction." "How many of you are there?" Taijin asked, helping the exhausted soldiers. 12 survivors out of 60, Min-ho replied. "Captain, the Vorthak are planning something big. They've been gathering ships. From across their empire, hundreds of vessels, maybe thousands," Dr. Kim paled. "That many ships could strip mine an entire planet in days." "It's worse than that," Min-ho continued. "They have a new weapon, something they call a spirit killer. It's designed specifically to destroy planetary consciousness." Taijin felt Verdania shudder through their connection. The planet had heard, and it was afraid. A young Verdanian came running through the village. It was Arya, one of the scouts. Her bark-like skin was glowing with excitement and fear. "Elder Yuna calls for the Guardian," she said breathlessly. "The Far Speakers have found something amazing." They followed Arya to the great grove where Elder Yuna waited with several other Verdanian elders. In the center of the grove, a massive memory crystal pulsed with soft light. "Show him," Yuna said to the crystal. Images filled the air above them. Distant stars, alien worlds, vast stretches of space. But these were not ordinary planets. As Taijin watched, he realized what he was seeing. "Living worlds," he whispered. 17 that we have found so far," Yuna confirmed. "All sleeping, all hiding from the Vorthak. They felt Verdania's awakening, but they are afraid to respond." "Afraid of what?" "Of being destroyed like the others," Dr. Kim said, understanding immediately. "If they reveal themselves as living worlds, the Vorthak will target them for elimination." Hana stepped forward. "But Guardian, if they all awakened at once, worked together, the Vorthak could not destroy them all." "That's it." Taijin felt the pieces falling into place. "They need proof that it's possible to fight back and win. They need hope." Elder Yuna nodded. "The question is how to give them that hope." Commander Min-ho cleared his throat. "Captain, there's something else you should know. The Vorthak Empire isn't as strong as it looks. Most of their conquered worlds are barely controlled. If those worlds had a reason to rebel—" "A coordinated uprising," Dr. Kim said excitedly. "Living worlds awakening simultaneously, causing rebellions throughout Vorthak space. But it would have to be perfectly timed," Taijin said. He could feel Verdania's agreement flowing through him. "And it would require someone to coordinate it all." "The Guardian Network," Yuna said, using another ancient term from Verdania's deep memory. Humans who bond with living worlds, creating a communication system across the galaxy. Taijin stared at her. "You're saying I'm not the only one. You are the first," Yuna replied. "But you will not be the last. Other humans have the same capacity for sacrifice, the same stubborn courage. They could form bonds with other worlds, create a network of guardians." The memory crystal pulsed brighter, showing more images. Taijin saw human prisoners on Vorthak ships, human slaves on conquered worlds, human settlements barely surviving on the edges of space. All of them potential guardians, if they could reach the living worlds. "How long do we have?" he asked Commander Min-ho. The Vorthak fleet will arrive in 30 days, maybe less. They're bringing everything they have. This will be their final assault on Verdania. Then we use those 30 days, Tai Jin said, feeling Verdania's power flowing through him. Like electricity, we reach out to every sleeping world, every potential guardian. We turn the Vorthak Empire's greatest strength against them. Their greatest strength? Dr. Kim asked. The fact that they've spread humans across the galaxy as prisoners and slaves, Tai Jin explained. They've unknowingly placed potential guardians on worlds throughout their empire. Arya suddenly gasped, her leaves rustling with excitement. Guardian, I feel something. Far away, but getting closer. They all looked at her, in confusion, but Tai Jin understood. Through his connection to Verdania, he could feel it too. Another consciousness, vast and ancient, stirring from long sleep. One of them is waking up, he said quietly. One of the living worlds heard our call. High above them, stars that had seemed dead for millions of years began to pulse with new light. The first response to Verdania's awakening was coming from a world 300 light-years away. The Guardian network was beginning to form, and with it, the first real hope for defeating the Vorthak Empire. But first, they had to survive the coming assault on Verdania. Tai Jin looked around at the faces watching him, human and Verdanian alike. They were all counting on him, on the impossible bond between a falling soldier and a living planet. He would not let them down. The Vorthak armada arrived like a storm of metal and death. Tai Jin stood on the highest peak of the Singing Mountains, watching thousands of enemy ships blot out the sun. The fleet was larger than anything he had ever seen. Massive dreadnoughts, swarms of fighters, and in the center a ship so huge it looked like a metal moon. Overlord Krex's flagship, Commander Minho said grimly. The World Breaker. I've seen it crack planets open like eggs. Through his bond with Verdania, Tai Jin could feel the planet's fear. But underneath the fear was something else. Anger. Ancient, powerful anger at the creatures who had murdered so many of its sister worlds. They're beginning their attack, Dr. Kim reported from her scanner. Bombing runs on the major forests. They want to weaken Verdania before the main assault. The first explosions lit up the horizon. Tai Jin felt each one like a punch to his chest. Trees that had stood for thousands of years were burning. Creatures that had never known violence were dying. Guardian. Elder Yuna appeared beside him, her bark skin glowing with determination. It is time. Tai Jin nodded. For the past month, he and Verdania had been preparing for this moment. The planet had been gathering its strength, remembering abilities it had not used in millions of years. Tell everyone to get to the deep shelters, Tai Jin ordered. This is going to get dangerous. As the humans and Verdanians took cover, Tai Jin placed his hands on the mountain's peak. The stone was warm to his touch, pulsing with life. Through it, he could feel Verdania's vast consciousness stirring to full wakefulness. Show them what a living world can do, he whispered. The mountain began to move. It started as a tremor, then became a roar that shook the entire continent. The peak where Tai Jin stood rose higher, growing like a plant reaching for sunlight. All across the planet, mountains stretched toward the sky, becoming massive defensive towers. In the forests, trees began to change. Their branches twisted and elongated, reaching up toward the enemy ships. Leaves hardened into razor-sharp projectiles. Root systems connected underground, creating a planet-wide communication network. The Vorthak had expected to face primitive aliens with simple weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting the planet itself. Impossible, Overlord Krex snarled from his flagship's bridge. Planets don't fight back. Sir, we're reading massive seismic activity across the entire surface, his lieutenant reported. The mountains are moving. Then level them, Krex ordered. All ships full bombardment. Turn this rock into space dust. But as the Vorthak ships fired their weapons, the planet responded. The atmosphere itself became a weapon, creating winds that deflected energy blasts and sent missiles spinning off course. Lightning storms erupted from clear skies, striking enemy fighters with impossible accuracy. From his mountain peak, Tae-jin directed the planetary defenses. He could see through 1,000 different perspectives at once. Every tree, every rock, every drop of water was his to command. The human stubborn refusal to give up, combined with Verdania's ancient power, created something the galaxy had never seen before. A guardian in full battle mode. "Concentrate fire on the flagship," Tae-jin commanded, his voice carrying across the planet through the root network. The mountains responded. Peaks that had grown to impossible heights began launching, massive stone projectiles. But these were not ordinary rocks. They were guided by planetary consciousness, seeking their targets with perfect accuracy. The World Breakers' shields flared as boulders the size of buildings slammed into them. Overlord Krex felt his mighty ship shudder under the assault. "Impossible," he repeated. "No world has fought back like this in 10,000 years." In space above the battle, another ship watched the impossible scene. General Choi Kyung-ho of the Human Defense Force had arrived with a rescue fleet, expecting to find Verdania conquered. Instead, he witnessed something that would be talked about for generations. "Sir, are you seeing this?" his tactical officer asked in amazement. General Choi stared at the displays. The planet below was literally reshaping itself, growing new mountains and forests in real time. Enemy ships were being pulled down by gravity wells that shouldn't exist, trapped in atmospheric storms that moved with intelligence and purpose. "Get me a communication link to the surface," he ordered. "I need to speak with whoever is in charge, down there." The link crackled to life and a familiar voice answered. "This is Captain Lee Tae-jin. General, I suggest you keep your ships clear of the planet's atmosphere. It's about to get very crowded." "Captain Lee," General Choi remembered, the name from the casualty reports. "You're supposed to be dead." "I got better," Tae-jin replied. "Sir, with respect, we don't need rescue. We need you to stop any Vorthak ships that try to escape." "Escape?" General Choi looked at the massive enemy fleet. "Captain, they outnumber us 100 to 1. Not for long." As he spoke, the forests of Verdania began to launch themselves into space. Massive trees, root systems and all, rocketed upward like living missiles. They struck Vorthak ships and began to grow, spreading across the hulls like aggressive vines. Within minutes, dozens of enemy vessels were completely covered in vegetation. The trees drew power from the ship's own energy systems, growing faster and stronger. Vorthak crews found themselves trapped inside ships that had become forests. "By the stars," General Choi whispered. "How is this possible?" "Verdania has been sleeping for millions of years," Tae-jin explained, as he guided another wave of attacks. "The Vorthak thought they had killed all the living worlds. They were wrong." Overlord Krex realized his fleet was being destroyed by an enemy he couldn't understand. His mighty ships, weapons of 1,000 conquests, were being defeated by trees and rocks. "All ships, retreat to minimum safe distance," he ordered. "Prepare the spirit killer weapon." The massive device emerged from the World Breaker's belly, a crystalline structure that pulsed with dark energy. It was designed to sever the connection between planetary consciousness and the physical world, turning living planets into dead rock. "Guardian," Elder Yuna's voice reached Tae-jin through the root network. "The death weapon, it comes." Tae-jin felt Verdania's fear spike. The spirit killer had destroyed 17 living worlds. Its dark energy could cut through any defense, any shield. "Not this time," Tae-jin said grimly. "This time, we're ready." He reached out through his bond with Verdania, but he didn't stop there. For the past month, he had been building connections with other awakening worlds. 17 planets across the galaxy had heard Verdania's call and begun to wake up. Now, for the first time in millions of years, multiple living worlds acted as one. The spirit killer fired its beam of death energy at Verdania's heart, but instead of striking a single planet, it hit a network of connected worlds spanning light years. The energy dispersed across 17 different targets, too weak to kill any of them. "Impossible," Overlord Krex screamed. "The weapon has never failed." "It's never faced a Guardian network before," Tae-jin replied over the communication channel. "Your empire is built on the conquest of dead worlds, but we're not dead anymore." Across the galaxy, sleeping planets began to wake up. Worlds that had hidden their consciousness for eons suddenly blazed to life. Vorthak-controlled systems found themselves facing planetary rebellions as their conquered worlds remembered what they had once been. The empire that had ruled through fear and overwhelming force suddenly discovered that the very foundations of their power were turning against them. Overlord Krex watched his fleet being destroyed by an enemy that shouldn't exist. For the first time in his long life, he felt genuine fear. "All ships, full retreat," he ordered. "We'll return with the entire Imperial fleet." But as the surviving Vorthak ships fled, they carried with them the knowledge that everything had changed. The age of easy conquest was over. The living worlds had awakened, and they had a guardian to guide them. On Verdania, Tai Jin felt the planet's joy as the enemy retreated. But he also felt something else. A calling from the stars, from other worlds that needed guardians of their own. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Verdania, the galaxy had become a very different place. Taijin stood in the Council Grove, watching representatives from 43 awakened worlds gather for the first Guardian Assembly. Beings of crystal and gas, living metals and organic forests, all connected through the network he had helped create. "The reports are coming in from across Vorthak space," Dr. Kim So-ra announced to the Assembly. 217 worlds have declared independence. The Empire is collapsing faster than anyone predicted. Through his enhanced connection to the Guardian network, Taijin could feel the truth of her words. Across the galaxy, worlds that had been conquered and enslaved for centuries were remembering their own power. Some were fully conscious planets like Verdania. Others were worlds where the native species had learned to work with their planetary spirits. All of them had one thing in common. They had human guardians. "Guardian Taijin," a voice called from across the grove. It was Commander Park Min-ho, but he was different now. His skin had the same subtle glow that marked all guardians, and his eyes held depths that spoke of connection to something vast. "Guardian Min-ho," Taijin replied with a smile. "How goes the awakening of Kepler 442? "The crystal forests are magnificent," Min-ho reported. "The world consciousness there is ancient beyond measure. It remembers when the galaxy was young, and all worlds spoke to each other as friends." This was the miracle that had grown from Taijin's impossible survival. Humans, with their stubborn courage and willingness to sacrifice, made perfect partners for planetary consciousness. The combination of human determination and planetary power was proving unstoppable across the galaxy. "Guardian Network confirms contact with the Vorthak homeworld," announced Guardian Kim Da-hee from her position near the Great Memory Crystal. "Overlord Krex has returned with the entire Imperial fleet, over 10,000 ships." A murmur ran through the Assembly. Even with all their victories, 10,000 ships was still a terrifying number. "He's desperate," Dr. Kim observed. "His empire is crumbling. This will be his final attempt to destroy what we've built." Elder Yuna stepped forward, her ancient bark showing new growth patterns since Verdania's full awakening. "The old enemy brings all his strength to bear, but he does not understand what he faces. He thinks he's fighting individual worlds." Taijin agreed. "He doesn't realize he's fighting the galaxy itself." Through the Guardian network, he could feel the other awakened worlds. 43 fully conscious planets, each one capable of reshaping reality within its sphere of influence. Hundreds more worlds where human guardians worked with native species to unlock planetary potential. It was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Incoming transmission," reported Hana, who had learned to interface with human communication systems. "It's from the Vorthak flagship." Overlord Krex's scarred face appeared in the air above the memory crystal. His eyes burned with hatred and fear. "I know you can hear me, Guardian. Your little rebellion ends now. I have enough firepower to crack planets. And I have 43 living worlds that would like to discuss that with you," Taijin replied calmly. "Impossible. No communication system works across those distances instantly." "You're right," Taijin smiled. No artificial communication system works that fast, but consciousness is different. Thought travels at the speed of will. As he spoke, stars began to move in the sky above Verdania, not moving physically but blazing brighter as the worlds around them awakened to full power. From Verdania, the observers could see dozens of distant suns flaring with new light as their planets remembered what they were meant to be. "What are you doing?" Krex demanded. "Showing you what you never understood," Taejin replied. "Planets aren't just rocks with things living on them. They're not resources to be harvested. They're minds, vast and old and patient, and you've been murdering them for thousands of years." The Vorthak fleet had positioned itself in the space between 3 star systems, thinking this would give them tactical advantage. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by awakening worlds that could reach across space with their influence. Gravity wells began forming around the fleet. Not the simple gravity of planets, but controlled gravitational fields that could crush ships or fling them across solar systems. Space itself began to twist and bend as 3 different planetary consciousnesses worked together. "All ships, open fire," Krex screamed. "Destroy everything." But the weapons that had conquered 1,000 worlds were useless against enemies that could manipulate the laws of physics. Energy beams bent back on themselves. Missiles found their guidance systems rewritten by planetary will. The vacuum of space itself became thick as atmosphere, slowing the massive ships to a crawl. "This is impossible." Krex repeated his favorite word. "Matter doesn't work this way." "It does when consciousness guides it," Taejin explained. "Your empire was built on the idea that intelligence is rare and consciousness is weak. You were wrong on both counts." General Choi's human fleet watched in amazement as the Vorthak armada was systematically disabled. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were being caught in nets of solid spacetime, their crews safely contained but completely helpless. "Guardian Taejin," General Choi's voice carried wonder and respect. "Are you actually capturing the entire fleet?" "The worlds prefer to rehabilitate rather than destroy," Taejin replied. "The Vorthak have forgotten that they were once part of the galactic community. Perhaps they can learn to remember." This was the true power of the Guardian Network. Not just the ability to fight, but the wisdom to find better solutions than endless war. Overlord Krex found his mighty flagship trapped in a cage of crystallized space. Through his viewports he could see other worlds, living worlds reaching out with tendrils of controlled gravity and focused consciousness. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "For you to understand," Taejin replied. "Your people were not always conquerors. Long ago they were explorers, scientists, artists. The galaxy remembers." Images began forming around the trapped fleet. Memories held in the quantum structure of space itself, showing the Vorthak as they had been millions of years. Ago, a proud species that had worked with living worlds, not against them. "That was before we learned the truth," Krex snarled. "The universe is hostile. Only the strong survive." "You learned a lie," Taejin corrected. "Strength isn't about taking what you want. It's about protecting what you love." As he spoke, more images appeared. The Guardian Network was showing the Vorthak what they had destroyed. Hundreds of living worlds, each one unique and beautiful, snuffed out by Imperial conquest. For the first time in centuries, some of the Vorthak began to weep. "The choice is yours," Taejin continued. "Join the galactic community as partners, or remain trapped in your metal cages until you choose to change. And if we refuse, then you remain trapped. The living worlds are patient. They can wait as long as necessary." Overlord Krex looked around at his disabled fleet, at the faces of his crew members who were seeing their own history with new eyes. The empire he had built was gone. The power he had wielded was meaningless against enemies who could rewrite the rules of reality. "What would partnership look like?" he asked quietly. "Like this," Taejin replied. The cage around the flagship dissolved, but instead of freedom to attack, Krex found his ship surrounded by beauty. Living worlds had created a garden in space, with breathable atmosphere and gravity that felt like home. Plants from a dozen different worlds grew in impossible formations. Sustained by pure planetary will, your people can learn to build instead of destroy, Taejin offered. To explore instead of conquer, to be part of something greater than themselves. Across the galaxy, the transformation continued. World after world awakened to its true potential. Humans who had been slaves or prisoners found themselves becoming guardians, bridging the gap between individual consciousness and planetary awareness. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation had begun. Years later, Taejin would stand once again in the council grove, but now it was filled with representatives from thousands of worlds, humans and aliens, living planets and spacefaring, civilizations all working together to build something the galaxy had never seen. A true community of minds. Do you ever regret it? Dr. Kim asked him one day as they watched Verdanian children play with Vorthak youngsters. Falling from orbit without a suit? Taejin smiled, feeling the contentment of 43 worlds flowing through the Guardian network. It wasn't a fall, he said. It was the first step toward coming home. He had fallen from the stars as a soldier. He had risen as something much more important. A guardian of the living galaxy.